if I put the willingness in, whether in the writing itself or in the learning, then whenever I need an answer, it comes to me.
Hi, Juliette, how are you?
Oh, hi, Russell. I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
That's you're welcome. Thank you for coming on to the channel. You're going to talk to us about, I guess, personal fortitude and management within your practice and by being an artist and working in the theatre trade. But before we get to the questions, tell us all about you. Who are you? What do you do? And how did you get here?
Okay, so I'm Juliette Brady-Quenin. And I'm French, as you'll hear from my accent. And I've been living in London for 15 years now, and I write plays. So far, I've written 8 full-length plays, and I'm currently working on play number 9. What to say? In London, my work has been performed at the Lion and Unicorn in Kentish Town. At the Take Courage Theatre in Canada Water, in Hammersmith, in a venue that is not per se a theatre, but we had a good production there. And in America, it's been performed by the Horse Trade Theatre in New York and by the Blank Theatre in LA.
Wow!
So that's my performing playwriting experience. I've always been, art and creativity has always been part of my journey, let's say. I remember I have a little anecdote. When I was in between age 8 and 11, I was quite a naive child, but I was a very creative child. And I couldn't understand why all my classmates and my little friends didn't project themselves as artists in the future. Some wanted to be doctors, volcanologists, lawyers, and it was really puzzling me. How come those people don't want to be creative and artists as an adult? Because to me, life was about walking into life, being Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire in those wonderful musicals that I was watching on television. So I've always been a creative person. And as a matter of fact, for 15 years, I've trained as an opera singer, and I performed as an opera singer in Paris. And then I decided that my calling was in cinema, because cinema was so important in my life. I calculated recently for a play that I'm currently writing that I probably saw 10,000 movies in my life or something like this. So I got to the conclusion that because I loved cinema so much, then I needed to be a director in cinema or something like this. So I managed to get the funding in Paris to do this film school. And I started this class to become a film director. And within the courses, the classes, there was a class, acting class, theater acting class. And our teacher was brilliant. His name was, he's still alive. He's back in America now, John Haggerty. And he taught us Meisner. The approach was Meisner, which I never came across. I trained as an actor when I was in my early 20s, but I never came across Meisner before. And I'll finish that. The aim was the year and to write our own play, basically. And so I got into writing a play in English with my other fellow, director wannabe, and I absolutely adored it. I adored it much, much more than any other classes that I had I taken during that year of cinema directing. So
Okay.
when I fast forward 3-4 years after, when I moved to London, it was obvious for me that it was all about it was going to be all about theatre. So that's how it's been since I've been living here.
Okay, cool. Now, unfortunately, I think I've lost a picture of you for some reason.
Oh.
I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Oh, not
can
good.
you can hear and see me, yeah? Oh, there you go. Right, you're back. So when we spoke about you coming on the channel, you mentioned this lovely terminology, which I wrote down. You said, as an artist, you experience the loneliness of the long distance runner. Now, I find that fascinating and it really chimed with me. So tell me, what does that mean to you, that term? Why did you, what was that about?
Well, it's a paradox in itself when you work in theater, because the vision that people have when it comes to theater is collaboration. It's a collaborative work. Everything comes together to give this wonderful story a 3D dimension. It's a bit different for playwrights. Especially when you just an emerging playwright. I mean, when your play has been commissioned by a theater, or if you work with somebody else on the projects, it's a collaboration from the start, then the things are a bit different. But for me, my experience is one of working in front of my desk most of the time, and having to get to the finish line, basically. So when I told you the loneliness of a long distance runner, which I love that title, I think it's a brilliant title. There are two things. It's about doing that project from start to finish. And for me, for instance, a project can last up to 2 years. So it's a long time to be in front of your play and edit and re-edit and do it again. So it's a long time to do that, because as I just said to you, from the moment that an idea comes into my mind, which can be a word, it can be a sentence. The other day, for instance, I had these 2 words popping into my head, which was the orchid collector. I love the combination of those 2 words, the orchid collector. So an idea for a play can come from that. So from the moment these 2 words are coming into my mind, for instance, and the moment I'm going to send it to theaters, I'm going to send it out there, it can take up to 2 years. So it's a very long time. And again, the loneliness, that's a difficult one. I mean, initially you don't know. It's something that you have to learn progressively, that I personally learned progressively how to do, by listening to talks, reading books. It's a training. It's a proper training.
Yeah. Do you think that isolation is important for an artist? Do you think having that kind of meditative state, that kind of silence, have you found that to be useful for you?
Oh, it's crucial. It's crucial. I mean, I don't know how, if some people are able to write a play by going into a cafe nearby and just, having a headphone on their ears and concentrate while there's so many things going on around them. But I personally, I can't. So the first thing I do in the morning is I wake up, I have a little breakfast, and then I close the door on the world. I leave my phone in the kitchen. I can't have my phone with me. All the notifications on my computers are off. I don't have any notification coming, and I sit there and hopefully not straight away the inspiration will come after an hour or 2 hours. I work longer and longer periods of time, because I've noticed I used to work 2 or 3 hours at the beginning. That was the maximum I could do. But I quickly understood that the muse, let's call it the muse, will take my hand from reward me. The muse will reward me from standing still in front of my computer after a couple of hours, let's say. I'm entering, you can call it the muse, or you can call it entering the zone.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I think with my writing, I found I'm very good first thing in the morning, because I'm doing other stuff, but I get inspiration. I wake up, maybe have a herb tea or something. I will write for an hour, and it's usually like at 6 a.m. where everything is completely silent, and the world for me hasn't quite woken up. And I really like living in that space of nothing, which is kind of what you're describing, isn't it? But are there any downsides to the isolation, do you think?
Well, I find it's less and less of a difficult thing. I mean, initially you can think, okay, fear of missing out, FOMO, or why am I? Can I read a quote to you from a book? I'm a big fan of Alan Bennett. Alan Bennett is a famous playwright, a script writer, and he just issued, I'm doing his marketing for him. That's his last diaries. He writes diaries every 5 years. And the introduction to this very small one, which he wrote during lockdown, says, I'm going to try to read it with a good English accent. It says, but any writer would say that though the cells and plaudits come not with doing it, but having done it, the useful medal to have would be one bestowed, as it were, on the field of battle, hung round your neck in recognition of yet another fruitless morning spent at the typewriter, or after a week or even months spent staring out at the window. And there is a picture of his desk with the window. So, yeah. It's a hit and miss, really. Those days where something brilliant will, or you think something brilliant is coming, or those days where, you know, you just want to go out and be with the crowd, and going to an exhibition or yet another movie in cinema, or it's hard to be there in your room on your own with nothing happening, not knowing what direction you take, if the direction you're taking is the right one or not the right one. But it's about consistency. It's about this routine. I mean, you know, there's always this debate around spurt of the inspiration versus being routinely sitting at your desk at 9 o'clock every morning sharp. And I find that I used to work on this, you know, on the thing of inspiration, and it works for a while, but then it dries out very quickly. But when you sit down every morning at 9 in front, for me it's 8, let's say 8, in front of your desk, there's something quite interesting that happens, because first of all, you shift your identity. The moment you're doing, I mean, if I want to call myself a playwright, of course, people would say, you're only a playwright if you're produced by the National Theatre or by the Royal Court, or etc. But I think that as an artist, whatever you are, whether you're a dancer or a painter, it's about shifting your identity to become that person. And you only shift your identity when you're doing it every day at the same time for forever. What I tend to do is every 6 weeks, I do like the school children. Every 6 weeks, I take a break from it. So for a week, I'm not writing.
Right.
Which is, it's a challenge. It's quite a challenge, because you tend to fall into you have to have stuff in place during that week. It's also a week that I'm taking to nourish myself.
Yeah.
Because when you work consistently on something forever, you're drying out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So yeah,
Drop it.
so that week for me is about, as I said, going to exhibitions, going to see a movie, going to theater.
I really like that terminology, shift your identity. I kind of know what you mean, because
Yeah.
I tend to wear different hats, so it'd be producing, performing, writing, whatever, and I do have to like gear myself up to change the hat, you know, to find the other identity of Russell, as well. I've got to be that other person. That's really interesting, because you talk about the discipline of doing your writing at certain times, etc., etc. So moving on to the last section of our interview, which is about the fortitude that is required from an artist, this kind of self-discipline, as it were. And you spoke, before we did this interview, you cited that you consider yourself to be self-taught.
Yes.
What do you mean by that? And how does that manifest now that you are, you know, you're a produced playwright? You know, yeah, just tell us about being self-taught. And does it set you apart from differently from people who are taught? What is taught, you know, etc.? What was the self-taught?
Well, I think that I understood who I was as a person, and the difference that stood between me and, let's say, someone in England that goes to a good university, does a drama course, and you know, becomes a playwright, and everything falls into places. You know, this image of the taught, not the self-taught, the taught playwright. And I come from a culture, France, where it's we like to see ourselves as prestigious, or not prestigious, but enlightened amateurs. So you know, that's where the self teaching comes, right? Which is, you know, when I say I'm self-taught, in actual fact, I've trained as a director. I've trained as an opera singer. So I've got this training, but I've never properly trained as a playwright. It's you know, there's this thing that I love when you let go of any vision of who you should be. There's this thing that comes to you, which is again quite miraculous, which is when you know, that say, when you ready, the master will appear. And that's what I find, is that if I put the willingness in, whether in the writing itself or in the learning, then whenever I need an answer, it comes to me. So it can be a quote that I'm reading in the book. Don't know if I'm really answering your question here, but or a talk that I'm hearing on. Recently, for instance, I was experiencing not a block, but a fundamental resistance about doing the work, and I wanted to give up because it's too difficult, and this and this and that. And I came across this guy called Steven Pressfield on YouTube, which wrote extensively about resistance, and how resistance is a phenomenon that is outside yourself, and that's the only way to beat resistance is just to sit at your desk, which is simple, and that you know it, but then when you listening to it, it makes sense. So self-taught is a gift in itself, because nothing is written, nothing is set in stone. You learn as you go, basically. I don't know if it's answering your question really, but
yeah, I think I'm the same. Like, I think that I had, even as a child, a kind of natural ability and to perform, like in front of people. That was just something that was instinctive in me. Don't know where that comes from. And then I went through various training mechanisms, and you know, I went to college, and then, but ultimately, I always said, when people say, "Where did you train?" I tend to say, "On the stage," because I think all you need in training really is to be given the environment for you to be able to do the thing that you want to do. But I think maybe you tell me, but I think maybe in the playwriting world, I'm interested in if somebody can actually be taught to be a playwright, because can you? Do you know, can it
Well,
be?
you know, because I am since you know, I decided to write in English. The English playwriting has a set of rules and regulation, let's say, which are different from the French one. As I told you the other day when we spoke, I had to learn all those things basically. So of course, as you said, you learn in the doing. As a playwright as well, but everything nourishes me. So I go to a theater a lot. I read an incredible amount of plays. It's funny because I talk with playwrights sometimes, and they don't read plays, which is quite funny.
So, Juliette, to finish,
yes,
what's it like when you receive feedback on your playwriting? Just thinking about our self-taught ideology over academic teaching, etc. How do you feel about feedback? Because I suspect sometimes feedback can be maybe an academic exercise.
Yes, it's an exercise on downsizing your ego as well. It depends. You know, there's different sorts of feedbacks. There the good feedbacks, and you learn to recognize the good from the not so good and the partial, etc. But when I receive a very constructive feedback, I may cringe for, let's say, a couple of hours. Because it means more, basically because it means more work, because it means it says you're nearly there, but you can do better. So it's you can do better, especially as I said at the beginning, when you've been working on your project for 18 months, for instance, because I tend to keep for myself for as long as possible until I think it's perfected. I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and then I send to people I know, theaters, whatever, and it's about being teachable. It's about being teachable, and you know, if you're not teachable to start with, you very quickly learn to be, because the ultimate goal, the ultimate aim is to see your play on stage with actors, you know, performing your text, and so you have to jump the hurdles to get there. And yeah, feedbacks is the nourishment that helps you go further in an idea, go further in a technique, go further. It gets you there. You know, I see myself. I touch on that in an email that I sent you. I see myself as a craftswoman more than an artist now, and I see myself as someone who's going to be there for the long haul. And so I want to progress, and the way to progress is to accept the feedbacks of people that have been there longer than you, know better than you, because you become play blind after a while. You don't know your heel from your elbow, so to speak.
Yeah, no. Great. Thank you so much. Just before you go there, tell us what you're working on now.
Oh, so the last play that I've sent, as I say, it's about progress rather than perfection, as I say. So the last play that I sent out, which is called A Day in the Life of Noah Fitzsimmons, did very well. It's not produced yet, but it's been shortlisted by the Traverse Theatre, by the BBC Writers' Room. It's done very well so far. Need to push it a bit further, so I, you know, as to finally receive a production for it. And I'm currently writing a play that hopefully will be more about emotions and and atmosphere than the text itself. I'm thinking a bit about Chekhov here, you know, with a saga around a family with relationship, more than dramas and twists and turns, you know, about, you know, relationship and emotions and atmosphere. And it's called does it have a title yet? I don't even know if it has a title yet. It's called Sugar, or Bitter and Sweet. Bitter and Sweet.
Yeah, nice, cool. We shall
So
keep.
that's me.
Excellent.
Sorry.
We'll keep an eye out for it.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Thank you, Russell.
Well. Thank you, Juliette. Nice to meet you.
Nice meeting you.
Bye.